Hello, my name is Pablo Glombowski, and in this video I'm going to show you how to inject the library inside the Windows process. So you need to know C or C++ and to have a basic Windows internals knowledge. The question is, why would I need to inject a DLL inside the process? You may first think that all this is about hacking, but I am personally against hacking. Hacking is not a good practice, it's not legal. The second choice is antivirus and anti-malware or anti-spamware software. Typically, if you inject the library, for example, inside all processes, you can control, for example, how the import table has been modified, or if a given API has been hooked, for example, by inspecting the assembler code of a given library, of a given function, um, but typically in the case of antivirus and anti-malware, you would need to also work in kernel mode. All this is about user mode. Okay, in this video I will be showing user mode code. The third choice is software integration. By software integration, I mean that you would like to extend, for example, a given software to have more capabilities than what is allowed by using, for example, a legal API. Let's take, for example, the Gmail capability. You would like, for example, to encrypt files. Okay, you attach a file, or you drag a file to Chrome, and you would like to encrypt this file before it gets attached. This can be done by hooking an API, the register drag drop API, for example, and instead of passing the typical COM object, okay, you pass your own COM object. This is just an example. I know that all this may sound as an advanced coding, but in future videos I'm going to show you samples of how to deal with this. Another possibility is that you would like, for example, in Chrome or in Edge, to detect when a given file is launched, is executed. In this case, you have to first inject your DLL inside the process, the Chrome or the Edge process, and then to hook the shell execute library or whatever library is used to launch this file. Hooking means instead of letting the API, the Windows API, to be executed, okay, your own API is first executed, and then you give control to the original API. Okay, so for example, you hook the shell execute XW API. In this case, when Chrome calls shell execute XW, your code gets executed. You do whatever you want. For example, you decrypt the file, and then instead of calling the original shell execute XW with the original file, you launch this API with the decrypted file. This is just an example of a software integration case. Now let's go to coding. Okay, let's go Visual Studio. Here I coded a simple DLL. project. This is a very basic project. It is just a DLL, okay, a library. You will see that the first thing I do is to call the get module file name, okay. Then I get the real module file name, for example Notepad.exe, Chrome.exe, or whatever. I check if I am inside Notepad.exe, and in this case I simply show a message box saying success injecting library. Okay. Of course, I tell the name of the process. That will be, of course, notepad.exe, and the process ID. So when this DLL gets injected, okay, if the process is notepad.exe, it simply displays this message box. If it is injected in another process, it will simply not run this code and nothing will be displayed. There are many ways to inject a DLL. In the old time, there was a registry entry that was app DLL init that is not used in these days because this app init registry setting is not allowed. If I remember well, this is since Windows 7. You need to have a library that must be signed, okay, and you need to modify the local machine registry entry, and there were many disadvantages of doing this. For example, the process needs to use user32.dll, and the injection time may not be as soon as. This is an important point. The injection time, okay, because if the injection is too late, this is a disadvantage. So in this video I'm going to show you a typical way to inject a DLL, but it's not the best way, okay? Why? Because what I do is periodically monitor for the creation of a given process. In this case it's notepad.exe, and when this process is created, I just inject this simple dll.dll. But of course, Notepad is executed, then later on the program monitors, okay, there is a notepad.exe process, I inject it, okay, but it may be too late, for example, depending on what you need to do, okay. So this is not a practice, how to say, this is not a really good example of how to do things in the proper way. When you develop serious software, for example, let's say in Outlook, you may code a VSTO project, okay, and by this way you know that your VSTO code gets loaded almost as soon as Outlook starts. When you code an antivirus, you may also code kernel mode, so kernel mode programming, so when a given process is created, you may suspend the process and then you may simply inject the DLL in the suspended process. But well, let's start now and let's close this solution and let's open the injector. This is a little more difficult to understand, but it's not so difficult. So let's analyze this code. First, this executable takes two arguments: the process name, for example Notepad.exe, and the injected DLL path. In this case it will be the simple DLL.dll. Okay, so first I load the library just to confirm that the library can be loaded. If not, I simply display an error. Then what I do is to get all processes that are running. Okay, if I detect that Notepad.exe exists, okay, I return the process ID in this dword array. So for example, if you have 3 Notepad.exe instances, then this function will return an array of 3 entries, and here I will return the number of entries. If the number of entries is 0, or if the array is null, I simply exit. And then what I do is, for each process that I got, I try to inject the DLL in that process and display success or error depending on what happened. So let's now analyze this function that gets all the processes matching a given name. Well, here what I do is to get all the processes. Okay, this is not a very robust code. Okay, this is just for the for simplicity purposes. I am not doing some validations that I should do, but if I have to do a search and all this kind of stuff that I should have done, I would really make a very complex code, and this is not the goal of this video. So I enumerate the processes. This is not good because see that here I enumerated up to 124 processes. Okay, but well, so now for each process that I got, okay, what I do is to open this process, then I call this API. Okay, there are several ways to get the modules, but I prefer to use this API than this other API because this new process modules API typically fails in Windows 10. Okay, so I call this get process image, but I may call both in case one fails. So I call this function, okay, with the process handler, okay, and it returns the module name, the module path, sorry. In this case, I simply get the last component of this path and I compare it against the process that I'm searching for. If it matches, I simply add it to the array. I close, of course, the handle, and this is the function that returns all the processes that are currently running that matches a given name. And then this is the more interesting part of this video, that is how to inject the DLL in this process. First of all, I clarify that for the case of this video, I will be injecting DLLs in 64-bit processes. Okay, a process, as you may know, can be 32 bits or 64 bits. This function is the same. Okay, this is really the same, but you need to know that if the DLL is a 64-bit image DLL, then the process must be the process must be 64-bit process, of course. So here again, in a real project, you need to check if the target process is a 32-bit process, then the DLL must be a 32-bit DLL. If the target process is a 64-bit process, then the target DLL must be a 32-bit DLL. Okay, so here the first thing I do is to get the module handle of kernel 32. I will explain why. Then I open again the process. Okay, I allocate a small part in the target process. I call virtual alloc x to allocate let me explain. I really need to execute in the remote process, okay, a remote thread that will be load library. This is the function that I need to get executed in a remote thread in the process. So the load library takes an argument that is of course the library path, and this is what I need to allocate. I really need to allocate the DLL path, okay, +1 because of the last character. So I allocate this amount, this memory in the target process. I write in this allocated memory location the DLL path, and then I call this that executes a remote thread inside the target process. I wait for this thread to finish. I get the exit code, okay. I close the thread and I release everything. So let's see if this works. If this works, it means that, for example, let's start this. Okay, this is my first Notepad process. Let's start another one, for example. Okay, second instance. So here you will see that. Okay, let's sort it by name. I have two Notepad processes. These are the handles in decimal. Okay, now let's see if it works. Here I have everything ready. So if this code works, this means that inside Notepad.exe, that should be a 64-bit. I don't have the column. Let's show the platform column. It's a 64-bit process. That's okay. Here, see that when I sorry. Okay. Well, that's okay. See that it's a the debug version, 64-bit. Okay. So let's run it to see if it works. See that it first got loaded in this process ID. Okay, that is this one, and then in this other one. Let's analyze this using this internal tools. Okay, this is Process Explorer. Okay, so let's see inside Notepad. This is an interesting tool. It tells you the handles and the DLLs or the libraries that are loaded inside the process. So if I do simple DLL inside process, so sorry, Notepad. Okay, you will see that it should be there. Simple DLL, okay, that's okay, and simple DLL is okay. Now let's close this and this, and let's open it again. Okay, Notepad. It's okay, simple DLL is not yet loaded. Now I execute it again and see that it got loaded. So in a typical case, you will be polling each, for example, 100 milliseconds. You will be inspecting if Notepad.exe or Chrome.exe or whatever the process you want to inject the DLL is in memory, and if it is in memory, you will be injecting your library inside this process. In the case of Chrome, for example, you need to take into account that typically Chrome has several processes. Okay, well, I don't have Chrome installed, but I have Edge, that is a Chromium-based project, and see that MS Edge has this process that is the parent process, and it has some child processes. Okay, you may be willing to inject your DLL inside this process that is the visual process. Okay, so that's all I need to show in this first video. I hope you enjoyed it, and see you in future videos.